Scott, welcome to the show again. Great to have you back. We will get to the amazing cognition news, but I got to know, did you cheese IOI 2014 problem number 6?
I can't answer that question actually, but no, it's great to be back and it's great to see you guys again. How are you guys doing?
We're doing great. And I mean, congratulations on the launch. Can you break it down for us? What is different about Devon and cognition today?
Yeah, absolutely. And so what we rolled out today is essentially an agent native IDE. And what that means is, I think there are a lot of great products out there that are about really accelerating you in a synchronous workflow. What we've always built Devon for is to be truly asynchronous and to be able to delegate and to have your own team of Devons that's taking on tasks, and to be able to manage several Devons at once or to be doing other things while you're working with Devons at the same time. And what we're rolling out essentially is a way to really cleanly, interactively work with your Devons as you're using it. And so it's a full IDE experience. It's a collaborative planning experience at the start of each session, and then some of these other features like Devon Search and Devon Wiki that we've been rolling out.
What else do you have? I have a big question.
Go into it.
I want to just get into your overall thesis for AI and why and how the market's moving broadly. Almost 10 years ago to the day, Sam Altman posted a blog post called Bubble Talk, where he said, everyone was saying we're in a bubble. Here, let's format it as a bet. And he said the top 6 US companies in terms of unicorns are Uber, Palantir, Airbnb, Dropbox, Pinterest, and SpaceX. They're currently worth just over 100 billion. He thinks that in 2020, those companies would be worth over 200 billion. There's a few of those companies that are worth over 200 billion alone. He also said Stripe, Zenefits, Instacart, a bunch of other companies will be worth more than 27 billion. And I think he was off, but only by a few weeks. And it was this interesting thing where everyone felt like it was a bubble. He formulated into a bet. He was correct. But how are you feeling about the overall murmurs about, is AI a bubble?
Yeah, and I think he was forecasting like a 3x or something in just a few years. And so whether he was like barely off or not quite, or barely made it. I mean, I think it's like, certainly if you just hear that list of companies, Uber and Airbnb and SpaceX and Stripe and all, I think the point was very clearly there that those companies did have real merit and real value, and they proved out a lot more of that. Actually, I mean, it's almost comical it's been 10 years now since then, and to just think, wow, like these are some of the great public companies, right? And I think that we were talking about this, but I was thinking about it a lot because it's been almost exactly 10 years. And it's also, I mean, it's super cool. Sam was running YC at the time, which is why he put that out. And obviously now he's running OpenAI. But yeah, I mean, I think people talk about bubbles so much in AI, and it's almost I feel almost the exact opposite, where the value that we are suddenly proving out in AI is almost underrepresented in what we're seeing and what is going on, and you see this in all these different spaces. And I think, as we were saying earlier, like I think code is one of the first ones because it's so nicely automatable. There's a clean feedback loop and all of these things that you can really train models to get really good at code. But I think we're really starting to see it basically everywhere. And it's a crazy thing to think about, but a lot of these businesses that we just mentioned, these are really, really amazing businesses and really powerful businesses, right? And a lot of what they do, arguably, is, they make particular flows of your life 1% easier, something like that, right? They come in this like particularly painful process and solve that hard part for you and deliver this. And obviously, these are incredible, incredible businesses. This is less about the businesses and more just about how big the world is out there, and how much value that there is to provide, right? And now when we're talking about AI and we're thinking about what AI can do, for consumers, it's, an AI assistant that does all of your work for you, does all your hobbies and takes on all these things, right? And in enterprise, obviously, we're talking about multiplying every single person's output by like 5x. And so I think that I was thinking about it especially because it really does feel like across a lot of these different layers, the foundation model layer, the application layer, and so on. It's a tough question to decide which one is going to succeed, which one's not going to be, and only a few companies get to be the Google and Amazon, and then a lot of companies obviously, have a tougher time. But if you just ask the question overall, is AI as a space going to deliver massive, massive value, and is it going to build these multi-trillion-dollar companies? I mean, I think at this point it's pretty clear that it will.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the Studio Ghibli moment happened last week? And I'm wondering, like, with the Levels IO flight simulator vibe coding, Andre
Yeah.
Karpathy coined that term. It kind of took fire. It really was a great term for something everyone was kind of dancing around. Are you expecting a Studio Ghibli style moment for programming? Because I think what was so magical about Studio Ghibli was that it took the onus of creativity out of the process and it made it personal. Because you could just take any photo from your camera roll, any selfie, you could take your own dog or your own profile picture, type one word, and you get something that feels cool and different. Is there a world where we get something where it's like, hey, make a video game about my life or something, and
Yeah.
it just does it? What would a mass adoption moment for AI driven programming look like?
For sure. Yeah. So I think there's two kind of different categories, I would say,
Sure.
within AI coding. And one is, I'll call it kind of the more um, general purpose, like let's say single use software type or more hobbyist
Yeah.
type work, right? Where you want to build a cool website, you want to do this, you want to make a nice game, or you want to put a lot of these elements together. And I think that's going to, I mean, it's honestly, it's already taking off
Yeah.
pretty massively. It's, you don't have to know how to code anymore, and you can put together like a really cool website and, set things exactly as you want them and so on, right? And I think I'm sure there will be more exciting moments to come where, as we cross these new tiers of capabilities, the interface is going to change for that and the set of things that you can do. On the other side, I would say is kind of the massive kind of just software engineering industry, which is a little bit more obviously is a little bit more oriented towards a lot of big companies that are spending maybe millions of hours of software engineering time developing like really really great software, right?
Yeah.
And making it super resistant to all the different things you can think of, figuring out all the little details of architecture and so on. And I think on that side, I think for the time being, that's going to be primarily focused on software engineers,
Mm-hmm.
just because it's while we're still working with these layers of abstraction, you still really need to have all of these kind of concepts in your mind and the ability to really just like reason with the computer architecture.
Yeah.
But there it's kind of like, we'll see like a 5x there. So maybe one way to describe it is like I think there will be a level of kind of programming and being able to interact with the world through code that everyone will have access to, which is super, super exciting on the one hand. And then on the other hand, I think for a lot of the deep technical work that we do, I also think that engineers who are focused on that and working on that are going to be able to do like 5x more. So we're kind of
Yeah.
seeing both of those sides at the same time.
How do you, what advice do you give engineers that are just joining the cognition team? You
Yeah.
guys have such a ridiculous sort of, probably, I would assume the average engineer at cognition is a 10x engineer in any other organization. And so you're looking for like, there has to be this pressure of joining, you're building the tools that build the tools. How do you think about sort of ramping people to the sort of to the output that you want to see out of engineers at every level of the organization?
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, there's very little advice that I can give because these folks are all way smarter than I am. But no, I mean, I think it's interesting. I mean, one thing that comes to mind is, people ask me all the time, like, should I even be studying CS? Like, should I even be, how do I even think about software engineering? And I think the main thing I would call out here is just, as the capabilities change, the interface of AI product changes a lot as well, right? And so it's one thing, it's for example, like, there was a phase where text completion was the main thing, and that was where the model capabilities were at, right? And you could get a lot of value from just pure text completion, right? And I think we're already past that and pushing into a lot of new things, but each new era that we get into in terms of capabilities is going to unlock a new product experience in AI code. And I think that the main thing to call out, because I think a lot of this is going to happen so quickly, is just it's really, really important to, as an engineer, to stay on top of all these tools and to understand how best to work with them. I think at this point, it's, there's no shortage of things to do in code. I don't think we're going to run out of things, software that we want to build anytime soon. And so I think it's more a question of how do you stay maximally effective at, at building software. And a lot of that is just, really being up to date with everything that's happening and understanding each of the new waves and learning how to use these new technologies, because it does take time to learn.
How do you think about AI adoption among engineers broadly? Or has every, there has to be, I think about the example of like the Japanese soldiers that like didn't know the war ended. And so they were just like on an island and like, still like in like, war fighting mode, and it would have been like 20 years or something like that. And so I think there has to be engineers out there that like, that maybe they don't know about cognition, or they don't know about OpenAI or any of these other tools. And but it has to be some, like, I would imagine like
Yeah.
90% of people that are just obsessively writing, code every single day, 90% plus are sort of aware of these tools. But how do you think about adoption broadly?
Yeah, for sure. No, and I mean, I think at this point there's I mean, a pretty significant fraction of all the top engineers in the world are using these AI tools every day, and they're getting a lot of value out of them. The main thing I would just say here is this is where, and folks sometimes like to get a little kind of wishy-washy about, AI is going to come in and then suddenly all of our problems are going to be solved, right? And I think one of the things that we're finding, even in code is, yeah, there's just a lot of practical work to do out there in the world, right? And so I think it's one thing to, to be able to solve these theoretical problems in a vacuum. It's another thing to, all of these different code bases out there, all of these different development environments, all these details. There's a lot of COBOL out there in the world still. There's a lot of all of these various different languages or all of these crazy idiosyncratic setups. And so I think one of the big things, honestly, that we're solving as a space is actually not just the capability itself, but just solving for a lot of these practical constraints and getting the technology to the point where it works for everyone and not just, the subset of people who are building the latest and greatest apps in Python and TypeScript or whatever it is, So
can you talk a little bit about the importance of multimodality and image diffusion and understanding images in the context of coding? I think a lot of people assume that, well, it's just code. You don't even need to think about the advantages of being able to process images effectively. But at the same time, it feels like the more data you throw at these models, the better they get, even if it feels completely tangential. Just having, the ability to not just know Python, but also speak Russian and Chinese and and Japanese and all these different languages, it seems to increase overall intelligence, even though it's not the narrow set that you thought it was.
Yeah, and by the way, it's actually a fun exercise if you've never done this before, to basically, a lot of the queries that we feed language models of just like raw, massive blobs of text, to try to do those yourself, like as a human. And one of the things that you find is like, wow, it's actually really hard if you're just looking at some massive chunk of text of just finding the thing that you want and getting the right thing. Like humans naturally, there's just like a lot of systems and how we process information visually and all of these things. And what I would say, yeah, I mean, I think in terms of code, for example, I think it's one thing for it to be, call it like theoretically possible. It's from the set of information I'm giving you, it is theoretically possible to extract out exactly what needs to be done. And you could say this, for example, with let's say you're trying to build a new feature and you just say, all right, here's the entirety of my 1 million line code base. Just tell me what I need to do to build the feature. And obviously no human can do that on the first try and just tell you exactly what needs to happen. And really, and for most of these more complex tasks, no AI can either. And in practice, the way that we solve these things is obviously through a much more iterative process that involves using all of our different tools. And, it might involve, for example, running the front end locally and then clicking around on the website and seeing what happens. And, you're trying to fix this button. So you go around and click on it, and you move around and you see what errors come up in the logs when you do that. And so that's how you solve your problem, right? And so a lot of it, I would describe it as almost like, setting the stepping stone instead of the rock cliff face, where you can make the incremental progress towards a solution. And this is what we do all the time in software engineering. And similarly, like I think being able to use image or being able to interact with these other data sources is what really gives AIs that same capability.
Please. One question that you are uniquely suited to answer: do you think we see an AI win an IMO gold medal this year? It was silver last year.
Yeah.
And I imagine we made some progress since then, but what's your take?
Yeah, I'd be pretty surprised if we don't. We have the greatest competitive programmer of all time is a guy named Taurus. His name is Gennady. He's from Belarus, and he works at Cognition, actually.
I've interviewed him.
You can look this up.
No, it's true. It's true.
It is objectively true. It's
it's objectively.
and so Gennady, we have kind of a bet going internally on mainly the question of not of whether it will be like a top level high schooler, which is essentially what the IMO or IOI gold medal is, but whether it will beat Gennady, who's the greatest of all time. And I think most folks think it's probably going to happen this year. Yeah, and if not this year, then next year. Yeah, I think Gennady is he's pretty adamant that he'll still be able to do it. And so I'm kind of looking for. I mean, I feel like we should have the we should do the whole show match, Gary Kasparov style, and do it with.
Let's
with
do it live. Let's do it live on
I'd love it.
TBPN.
Well, can you give us the call to action? It sounds like Cognition and Devon are much more accessible. How can people get started? How can they sign up? How can they play with this tool and see if it works for them?
Yeah, so we rolled out a whole new experience, and then on top of that, we would really love to hear what folks think, and so we're making it a lot easier to try out. And so we have a new plan that starts at a $20 minimum, and it's all available at app.devon.ai. So you can sign up immediately. It's fully generally available, and you can try it out on your code base.
Very cool. Well,
amazing.
Hope those GPUs don't melt. Hope the servers stay online, and good luck with with the next couple of months. As I'm sure it's going to be a continued rocket ship.
Yeah,
awesome.
Congratulations to the whole team.
Appreciate
Thanks
you
so
stopping
much.
by.
Great to
We'll
see
talk
you
to you
guys.
soon. Thanks a lot, Scott.
Talk soon.
Bye.